to skip this break for Infowars.com listeners. They'll get a little behind the scenes since we got you on late. I want to do a little bit of a pre-interview to see what you wanted to get into. We'll discuss that now for the Internet audience only.
Did you know that it's a...
Okay, we're on the Internet now, not on the AM and FM. We got about 3 or 4 minutes before we're back. Michael, I want to really give you a chance to run today. What is it that, because we didn't do a pre-interview, what is it you want to get into today?
Well, there's so much, again, my history started, I didn't know that when I came to America that I was going to be knee-deep in all of this kind of thing, but my philosophy is always to come to another country and do as the Romans do, So I wanted to learn about American history, and I found out that, we always know in Ireland that the Scots-Irish, fought in your War of Independence. I also found out subsequently that America is famous for losing the wars it wins, and that, the British crown, and I'm not talking about British people here, but I'm talking about the oligarchy that's preying over them, realized that it got its ass kicked in a situation of war. It couldn't take America with force of arms. It tried it, and it
So it did it through roundtable groups.
Exactly, and Cecil Rhodes and these people have been my study for, as long as I can remember. And that's where I came in, not just studying the Fabian movements, not just studying these Masonic orders, you see, but also studying in their context. I suddenly start realizing these people are operating in America. So my message was to get people out of the political pigsty and say, your troubles are not, listen, America, your problems are not necessarily within the political sphere. That's just an effect. That's not the cause. And then try to point out this surreptitious war of attrition that's been fought on American shores for the destruction of America. That was the main point, when I got to America, started to go into the public eye and make this be known, because, as I said...
And then people will say, well, Masons founded America, but that's the whole point. Build, destroy, build, destroy, build, destroy,
yeah.
Order out of chaos. And you've got the lower orders that weren't aware. You've also had some changes in Masonry. And George Washington, as you know, came out and spoke out against those groups that were coming in and infiltrating it and changing it. But really, he was just breaking through and finding out about higher levels to it. But we have to also understand that there was the secret destiny, as you know, of the United States, where they talked about in the 1600s coming here and founding this as the new Atlantis. So
that's right.
So there's the argument, it's always dual, yin yang.
Well, you're right on the ball, and it's great to talk to somebody like this who knows that before the official founding of America, these Templars and their agents were already ensconced in the country.
Yeah, they had a bad day yesterday on their on the 13th anniversary. That's
right. And we have, the thing that President John Adams, President George Washington, they did start to, whistleblow what was going on.
Yeah, Adams had he had the anti-Masonic party that came up later.
That's right. But they did it from being insiders first. First, they hobnobbed with Adam Weishaupt and his cronies. They hobnobbed with the agents of people like Charles de Lorraine, from the province of Lorraine in France and the Grand Orient Freemasonry of France. And then they started to realize, wait a minute, this is a bunch of Luciferianism here. It's not right for America. And they sounded the warning, In a modern context, though, these people who are working for the old British system, who operate, people got to realize that these people have worked through the Russell Trust, they've worked through the Skull and Bones, they worked through the Knights of Columbus, they worked through Scottish Rite Freemasonry. They are alive and well in the American context to take America down because it was too big to take down with a gun to the head situation. That kind of thing. That jackboot system does work in a small context.
Okay, we'll get into that. I also want to get into the hierarchy of the New World Order and the power structure, kind of the historical overview, because I know you're very well informed, and I want your unique perspective on that as well. Okay, so we'll talk about the secret history of the United States and the war with these forces. We'll talk about who the globalists are, what their master plan is. What's some of the other things you want to get into briefly?
Oh, that's good to go with. We got an hour, so that's great.
Well, we got an hour.
We're doing it. Also, want to get into maybe the technology aspect.
Yeah, hold on. We've got an hour
today.
We got an hour and 40 minutes, Michael.
Well,
okay, but you're good for an hour and 40, right?
And the whole technological war.
All right, here we go. All right, we're going to go over the basic view from Michael Desarian of the British Secret Society networks using Freemasonry as one vehicle because of its secrecy. They can inhabit any group. And then the secret symbolism, the language that's all around us that they communicate through. And again, the low-level Masons aren't even part of it. And there are other religious groups and secret groups. Masons oversimplifies it. Then we'll get into what the end game is and the technocratic oppression, the electronic control grid. We've got an hour and 35 minutes left with our guest. Okay, Michael, you got the floor. Start rolling.
Well, that was, when I got over to States, then I had to basically brush up, and that's when I bumped into the work of Nord Davis and especially Ralph Epperson, who's just great. His work put a lot of pieces together for me. And then, of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and Eustace Mullins. It became like a study, because when I realized that the average American doesn't know anything about this, I'd bump into the average, I'd bump into occasionally to a Vietnam vet who had been through so much hell through the VA hospitals, that these guys knew, something about what was going on, especially about the federal system and the Federal Reserve and so on. And so my education began in the 90s, to sort of brush up on, okay, I've seen it in an Irish context. I've seen that one picture of tyranny, but how does this work in the American context, So as I started to study more and got into the Webster Tarpleys, you see, and even the Dr. John Coleman's, it was a long discovery to find out that this country didn't really win the War of Independence, because they let their guard down. They became so apathetic. They became so decadent and narcissistic that, it was easy pickings right from the time of, the first presidents, basically, for this federalistic group to get to insinuate itself into the body politic of America through the federal systems, to get rid of the republic, to change the Constitution, to amend it, and so forth and so on, all the stuff that you've covered yourself and so many things. This was my education to find out. But my main point was, though, is more of a historian aspect, to say, look, never forget that America is just the last in line to be taken down. The people who are doing this have colonized the world. They've been doing it for centuries of time. And my researches leaded back to Egypt. First of all, I had studied the ancient Irish myths. That helped me, with my first book on Atlantis, to get into a lot of areas there to show just how ancient this actual, oligarchy is, that they keep bloodlines, and these bloodlines are still today, and the politicians that pop their heads up every 4 years, there they are again with their bloodline connections back to the ancient royal oligarchs of Europe. But then what happened is I got more and more, into it after the first book was done. Then I started to really look at the Egyptian roots of this, and my research took me to a group that I refer to as the Atenists. It's the same group of, people would refer to, say, by the terms such as Luciferian or whatever. My term for it is Atenists. This is going back to the 14th dynasty, the 18th dynasty of Europe, 18th dynasty of Egypt, about 1400 years BC is where it all began. So I've actually traced it back to the reign of the Pharaoh Akhenaten.
Well, just to be clear, when you read mainline, even British history, they say they're related to the pharaohs. They say they are related to Moses, and the queen is coronated on Jacob's stone, and all of this, and so they really believe this. And worldwide, international royalty, even in Japan, says that the greatest queen is the royalty in England, and that they all claim they're part of that and are part of the same secret societies there. So regardless of whether it's true or not, they do claim lineage to the pharaohs.
You're absolutely spot on. And you see, it doesn't have to be necessarily just bloodline. For a certain amount of the top boys, it is a bloodline connection. For everybody else that serves this monster, it's an ideological, connection. Equally as bad, equally as pernicious. These are not people who serve the good of the human race or for the uplift of the human race. These are ancient pharaohs who have kept bloodline dynasties, and people better believe that they have not gone away. The different houses of Europe that I address, you see, and the symbolism that they use. So as I started to track this back, it started to explain these things about, like you say, the symbolism behind the coronation, and all the various other symbolism and regalia that we see throughout all of Europe as well as Britain. And it was fascinating to see that, how it all went back to this particular individual and his sort of megalomania, this Akhenaten, and his basically solar cult. These were worshippers of the sun. They were worshippers of what I refer to as the dark side of the sun. And, their generation, they were expurged finally from Egypt. They had basically committed so much desecration on the land of Egypt that finally, in the reign of Akhenaten, the people of Egypt rose up and basically exiled these guys. And then history loses track of them. They just disappear. Whether you're coming at this from a biblical point of view, as you said, through the Moses story, or you're coming at it through alternative historical approaches, basically they're meant to have fallen off the map, and history pays them no more mind. My work picks up on the fact that after they were exiled, after this famous exodus, they did not fade away, and that these people are instrumental behind the powers in Greece.
All right, stay there. Stay there. We'll be back in 3 minutes with Michael Desarian. Stay with me.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.